Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So here's another deck profile for you guys today. This time it's an update on my Monarch deck. So I actually made a post earlier saying that this is actually a pretty good deck to pick up if you're a beginner, especially because, for those who really want to get into the game, this is actually not a bad deck to pick up. It's mostly for a casual audience, but honestly, there are ways you can actually kind of make this deck fairly competitive as long as you know how to play it correctly. And that's basically just what I wanted to show you guys today. So anyway, let's go and get started. So the best thing about Monarchs is that this is one of the very few decks that does not need an extra deck. And mainly because it takes advantage of tribute summoning monsters. So like Dracos, it does, just that. And it can be pretty funny if you, like I said, know how to play this deck correctly. And this deck can be kind of annoying if your opponent's not really prepared on how to deal with it. But anyway, starting off with 3 copies of Erebus. That's one of the main boss monsters. So one thing I love about this guy is that as soon as he tributes him, deciding that he's a foolish burial of goods on legs, you send 2 Monarch spells traps to the grave of different names, and you can either bounce back a card on that grave from hand or on field, and it does not target. So it's a good way just to get like non-targeting, non-destructive removal. Keep in mind you will have to bait out some negates if you want to pull off that, but going first, ripping a card out of your opponent's hand is still pretty ideal. So yeah, Erebus is pretty nuts. Next, 3 copies of Ehther. Ehther was actually limited for the longest time, and for good reason. This card basically allows you to tribute summon her out during the opponent's turn. So if you have a card like Stormforth and you activate this while Aether's in hand, during your opponent's main or battle phase, you can literally just tribute summon this card, and of course you can use one of your opponent's monsters. So yeah, Ehther is pretty good. But also same thing like Erebus. You dump a spell or 2 spells or traps, and then you can special summon a Monarch directly from the deck as long as it has 2,400 or more attack points with 1,000 defense. So yeah, Ehther is pretty good, and yeah, I definitely love what this card does. Oh, actually, one thing I forgot to mention about Erebus, some people often overlook. Erebus does have a really cool graveyard effect where, like, if he's in your graveyard, you can dump a spell or trap from your hand, and you can either recycle him or any other Monarch from your grave. So yeah, Erebus has a pretty cool graveyard effect. Never sleep on that. Anyway, moving on. I am running 1 copy of Kuraz as another Monarch monster. Simply, so when this card is normal or special summon, you can target up to 2 face-up cards, destroy them, and then each player draws 1 card for each cards they controlled that was destroyed. So basically, if you pop 2 of your own cards, you get to do the draw. So yeah, Kuraz is pretty good. It's also good for removal, but keep in mind you are risking to let your opponent draw. So make sure you don't really do that. So anyway, moving on. 2 copies of Vanity's Fiend, just because, as cool as the card it is, it's not searchable, unfortunately, because it has 1,200 defense rather than 1,000. However, Majesty's Fiend does have the 1,000 defense requirement, so at least this one is searchable, and we'll get to that why later on. But yeah, Majesty's Fiend and Vanity's Fiend just to, stall your opponent. Like, they can't special summon with Vanities. They can't use monster effects with Majesty's Fiend, so it's pretty nuts, especially if you can get both of them out. It's super hard to get around it. Moving on. Next, we're running 3 copies of Ehther. So this is going to be one of your best normal summons. If this card is normal or special summon, you can special summon 1 monster with 800 attack with 1,000 defense from your deck. And basically what you're going to do with that is you're going to summon out her husband, Erebus. Also, Ehther has an effect where if she's sent to the, if she's sent to the deck, or I'm sorry, not to the deck, to the graveyard, you can return one of your banished Monarch spells or traps, add it back to your hand. So it's a good way just to get some recursion off of it. Now, Erebus has a similar effect. Now, of course, when he's normal or special summon, during your main phase this turn, you can tribute summon 1 additional monster in addition to your normal summon. So that's pretty good. And then you can banish this card from your graveyard, target 1 monster with 800 attack with 1,000 defense in your graveyard, except itself, and you can special summon that monster back in defense mode. So it's pretty good. Now keep in mind, you won't be able to summon off the extra deck for the duration of the turn, but that's hardly going to be relevant, so yeah. And last but not least, 1 copy of Mithra. Mithra is a free special summon from hand. As long as you special summon her, you have to give your opponent a token. And if you use her as tribute fodder, you get to do another tribute summon in addition to your previous normal summon. So that's actually pretty good too. So yeah, Mithra is not a bad extender. I would definitely try her out. All right, so now moving on for the new addition to the deck, I'm running 3 copies of Ankhamorphite. I'm so sorry if I butchered that name. It's a really weird name, but anyway, this card recently came out in Lightning Overdrive. Actually, I've been meaning to get behind. This is why this is one of the reasons why this deck came out so late. I got a good look at this card and I saw that what its effects were, and I was like, oh wow, this is actually pretty good. So basically, he's an upstart goblin. If you place him in your pendulum skill, as long as you have you can if you have no monsters in your extra deck except itself, you can destroy this card, then draw one card. And of course, this does trigger its monster effect. So must be summoned from your face-up extra deck by having no cards in your extra deck except itself. And then you can special summon, you can only summon this card that way once per turn. So keep in mind, this is primarily only for tribute summon decks because, like, yeah, it conflicts if you have any other monsters in the extra deck, and yeah, it's pretty bad. But now, if it only worked on just face-up extra deck monsters, then it wouldn't be a problem. But anyway, yeah, the point is that this card is a really good upstart goblin slash tribute fodder, because as soon as it leaves the field, it gets banished. So yeah, it's pretty nice. All right, so now we're moving on to spells. The spell lineup is pretty self-explanatory. Most should already know what these do. So 3 copies of Domain. As long as you control a tribute summon monster, your opponent can't summon out of the extra deck. Also, you can make your level 8 Monarch monsters into level 6s. And lastly, if your tribute summon monster battles, it gains, if I'm not mistaken, oh, there it is. Yeah, 800 points of damage, or 800 attack points during damage step. Next, we got one of the main searchers of the deck, Tenacity. As long as you reveal a Monarch, you can search out any Monarch spell or trap. 3 Pantheism, another card that we got back at 3. And there's a reason why it's so broken. Its draw 2 effect is not once per turn. So, like, you can discard a Monarch spell or trap and draw 2 cards. The only thing that is once per turn is the banishment effect, where you banish it, reveal 3 Monarch spells or traps, and your opponent chooses 1. But yeah, Pantheism is super broken. I'm so glad we finally got this back. But anyway, moving on. 3 copies of Monarch Stormforth. Oh, actually, before I forget, I forgot to mention one little thing. This card does technically conflict with a few of the Monarch spells or traps. Stormforth, one of them. So Stormforth actually says you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck the turn you activate this. So that means you can't go into this first and then use Stormforth. That it's not going to work. Or so basically what you need to do is, like, aside from Stormforth, you know, like the only other ones that it shouldn't really conflict with too much is going to be Return in March. But yeah, for Stormforth, yeah, that's the only time it's going to conflict. So just bear that in mind. But anyway, moving on to the one-ofs. 1 copy of Return of the Monarchs. So if you attribute summon a monster, you can do a search. And this does search out Majesty's Fiend. 1 March of the Monarchs just to protect your tribute summon monsters. 1 Rhoda. 1 Foolish Burial just to get Erebus into the grave. And of course, 1 Called by the Grave because, you know, hand traps. And what's also funny about this deck is that it doesn't really spam too many monsters, so you don't have to worry about cards like Nibiru, like, whatsoever. But you will have to worry about cards like Effect Veiler or Imperm, even Ash Blossom, so, like, just bear that in mind. But moving on, 2 copies of Monarchs Erupt. You know, it's a skill drain for tribute summon monsters. And of course, 2 copies of the Prime Monarch. I'm not going to run Escalation simply because Ehther kind of is Escalation, and it's just better in every way. So yeah, and that's pretty much it. So it's 40 cards in the main deck. Now keep in mind, Monarchs do break every now and then. So, but like I said, if you know what to do and if you can pull off your combos correctly, it shouldn't be too big of a hassle. But there will be times where you're open up, your certain hands will look really stacked. But anyway, moving on to the side deck, running 3 copies of Artifact Lancia. I've already mentioned, like, why this card is so good. It's good against Charge Brigade. It's good against Eldritch. It's good against anything that revolves around banishing. 1 Pankratops, an excellent going second card. And actually something that might throw some people off, but I actually decided to run a Kaiju package. So I'm running 2 Gamma Seal, 2 Godarla, because, you know, Bird Up is still a deck. And if they hit you with that barrier statue, it's going to be pretty annoying to deal with, especially because, you know, they're just going to protect it. But with the Kaiju package, where if you just, like, get rid of the barrier statue and then summon out another copy of Godarla, you could just literally crash into them. But another good card to go with it is 2 copies of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. It's basically Dark Hole, so yeah, pretty nuts. 3 Cosmic Cyclone and a Harpy's Feather Duster, just to deal with, like, back row heavy strategies, and of course Red Reboot, because just about everybody is siding out Imperial Order, and yeah, this deck can kind of lose to Imperial Order, so just be ready for it whenever you, as long as you know if your opponent is siding it in. So yeah, that's pretty much it. But anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will catch you guys again next time.